Let's discuss Avatar Aang, The Last Airbender, the 2026 animated film continuation of the original series. This is another lecture. I'm Alexei. Let's begin with the foundations. I teach this material with a certain affection for careful definitions. It is important to understand what we are in fact discussing when we say this film continues the canonical through line of Avatar.
Hi, I'm Priyanka. I'm the student today and very ready to take notes while asking the occasional annoying question.
Topic definition and overview. To frame our discussion, Avatar Aang, The Last Airbender is an American animated fantasy action film directed by Lauren Montgomery, with a screenplay by Tim Hedrick and Christopher Yost, based on a story by Brian Konietzko, Michael Dante DiMartino, Hedrick, and Kenneth Lynn. It is the inaugural feature from Avatar Studios, itself a 2021 Nickelodeon division, established to safeguard and expand the franchise under the original co-creators' leadership. The film explicitly continues the original animated series continuity, placing the characters in young adulthood, roughly 13 years after the Hundred-Year War. Now, key terms. In simpler terms, the Avatar is the cyclical human mediator who reincarnates and can bend all four elements, tasked with maintaining balance between the physical world and the spirit world. Bending is the martial practice of controlling a single element, air, water, earth, or fire, except for the Avatar. The air nomads, Aang's people, were a monastic culture devoted to nonviolence and spiritual discipline. Their near eradication is the original series' moral wound. The spirit world is a parallel realm of non-human intelligences and energies. It is not merely a fanciful backdrop, but a causal dimension whose imbalance can deform events in the physical realm. These definitions matter because the film's plot, in which Aang and his allies encounter Togga and the Denied while confronting Avatar Sonam's staff, turns on the ethics of power crossing those boundaries.
So the basic premise is, Aang and the team try to rebuild what was lost with the air nomads, but they run into an artifact that shortcuts the process, raising the question whether that shortcut breaks something deeper, like balance or consent.
Exactly. The staff linked to Avatar Sonam can channel spirit world energy and grant airbending to non-benders. The narrative escalates when Togga, a once non-bender who was granted airbending, later frozen and revived, pursues a severe, arguably supremacist restoration. Aang's rejection of that expediency by destroying the staff is the film's thesis on responsibility. Relevance and stakes. Let's proceed to the next point. This film matters because it is Avatar Studios' first production, establishing a creative blueprint for expanded films and series with the original co-creators as co-chief creative officers. In light of prior adaptation turbulence, most notably the Netflix live-action project from which Konietzko and DiMartino departed in 2020, the film functions as a statement of custodianship. That is to say, it reassures audiences about canon fidelity while proving that long-form animation can scale to feature ambitions without abandoning the franchise's ethics.
So, moving on, can we get the basics of who, when, and how it looks and sounds?
Certainly. Formally, the animation employs a hybrid of 2D hand-drawn characters with 3D environments using deep canvas techniques. Lineage runs through Disney's Tarzan and Treasure Planet, here adapted for elemental combat and spirit world vistas. Flying Bark Productions in Sydney handled primary animation. Studio Mir in Seoul, with Cora Pedigree, provided additional sequences. Studio Puri also contributed. This pipeline yields expressive line acting amid volumetric lighting and dynamic camera work. Storms, temples, Republic City set pieces. while preserving the hand-drawn charm. Casting reflects an intentional recalibration toward cultural alignment. Eric Nam voices Aang. Jessica Matten is Katara. Roman Zaragoza is Sokka. Dion Kwan is Toph. Stephen Yoon, previously the voice of Avatar Wan in Korra, voices an older Zuko. Dave Bautista voices Taga. Taika Waititi appears as the spirit Gorillavark, and D. Bradley Baker returns as Appa and Momo. Ken Jeong's Cabbage Merchant cameo maintains a beloved continuity of misfortune. We observe that even small gags can bear surprising franchise weight. Jenny Ju's casting approach and public support from Mae Whitman for recasting Katara emphasize representation as a craft choice, not a repudiation of legacy performances.
And the leak. We should talk about that, right?
Indeed. In April 2026, portions of the film leaked online, followed by reports that a full high-quality copy circulated. A widely shared claim that Nickelodeon had accidentally emailed the film remains unverified. Subsequently, an arrest in Singapore cited unauthorized access to a media server, and Paramount later reported no vulnerability in its own systems. The incident drew comparisons to the 2017 Orange is the New Black and 2009 X-Men Origins Wolverine leaks. Beyond ethics, the event altered the discourse around distribution. The studio ultimately staged a one-week, two-theater engagement in Los Angeles and New York in late July 2026 to secure awards eligibility and align that with a San Diego Comic-Con premiere, then launched worldwide on Paramount Plus in July 2026. This sequence prioritized reach and, arguably, risk control.
And historically, the path to this film goes through 2021's formation of Avatar Studios, Lauren Montgomery's appointment in 2022, the Age Up reveal in 2023, then the casting confirmations through 2025 and 2026. Plus, Jeremy Zuckerman returning with a full orchestra for the score.
Correct. Production wrapped by March 2026. The title settled on Avatar Aang, The Last Airbender, and the soundtrack released with the Comic-Con premiere. Critical reception has been generally favorable. Rotten Tomatoes listed 87% positive, with an average rating near 7.1 out of 10, while Metacritic logged 68 out of 100. Praise for visuals and continuity, with recurring notes on pacing. Such is the trade when one compresses a serial grammar into a feature runtime. Mathematically, compression induces variance. A brief personal note, if you will. I first watched the original series as an object lesson in how Eastern and Western narrative logics can coexist. One observes martial clarity and spiritual humility cohabiting with deadpan humor about cabbages. This new film retains that synthesis while interrogating power's seductions in a way that feels, to some extent, disarmingly contemporary. Now, 3 big questions. Let's start with a structural overview of continuity and novelty. How does the film continue the legacy while introducing new elements?
So, how does the film keep the original series' heart while adding something genuinely new? What is the mechanism for continuity that doesn't just feel like nostalgia?
Continuity here is multi-layered. Creatively, Konietzko and DiMartino serve as co-chief creative officers of Avatar Studios. Lauren Montgomery, with direct experience on the original series and Korra, directs. This institutional memory preserves character ethics and action grammar. In-world, the film reassembles Team Avatar with matured roles. Zuko as a statesman warrior fire lord, Toph as the architect of metal-bending pedagogy, and Republic City as the cosmopolitan experiment they helped found. Musically, Jeremy Zuckerman extends leitmotifs through a full orchestral palette. retaining sonic identity while expanding dynamic range. For novelty, the film introduces the denied, non-bending warriors whose grievances become volatile once empowered by Sonam's staff, and Taga, who mirrors Aang's trauma but embraces coercion. The staff itself is structurally new, a device that can rewrite bending rules, yet it functions as a moral catalyst to reaffirm the series' commitments. Even the hybrid animation is a novelty that defers to heritage. Expressive 2D character performance remains primary, while 3D environments supply scale.
Can we talk about the challenge at the seam? How do you avoid the trap where new power systems break the old world's coherence, especially with something as radical as granting airbending to non-benders?
A fair question. The film introduces a disruptive mechanic, artifact-granted bending, but limits it to a morally unsustainable vector. It is spiritually corrosive and socially destabilizing. By having Aang destroy the staff, the writers perform a controlled experiment. They demonstrate the consequences, then close the pathway to preserve systemic coherence. Meanwhile, they seed a non-artifact route to renewal, new acolytes and a surviving herd of sky bison, the original airbenders, making cultural restoration a matter of practice and values rather than magic. This is continuity by negative proof. The world remains itself because the unsound option is repudiated on ethical and metaphysical grounds. On to our next point, a counterfactual. What if the 2026 leak had never occurred? How might reception and distribution have changed?
Right. If there was no leak, would we have seen a different marketing arc? Maybe a wider theatrical push? Or less pressure from fans to see it on the big screen?
Counterfactually, absent a leak, the studio would likely have preserved a longer runway of controlled reveals. Trailers emphasizing the hybrid visuals, music releases keyed to event milestones, perhaps a staggered festival strategy before any streaming commitments. The leak accelerated word of mouth on spectacle, while simultaneously undermining scarcity. Fan energy coalesced around seeing those visuals theatrically, but the studio's risk calculus also tightened. The ultimate choice, a micro-theatrical run for awards qualification, plus a rapid Paramount Plus worldwide release, balanced those forces. Without the leak, we can infer a higher probability of either a modestly wider theatrical footprint or a longer prestige-style rollout timed to autumn markets. Yet streaming-first economics were already ascendant, so the baseline trend may well have converged on a similar endpoint, only with a different tempo.
An industry response. What does a case like this change in practice for studios and, honestly, for artists who are the most hurt when the moment is taken away?
We observe three vectors. First, security hardening across multi-vendor pipelines, stronger access controls, watermarked dailies, compartmentalized asset sharing, and explicit incident playbooks. Second, legal follow-through, as the Singapore arrest illustrates, to establish deterrence. Third, cultural messaging. Creators and crew publicly frame the leak as disrespectful to labor, reinforcing norms that fandom should not consume unauthorized copies. In distribution strategy, studios may compress windows even further once a breach occurs. Paradoxically, this can preserve some momentum while sacrificing theatrical breadth. It is, if you will, a minimization of information entropy in a compromised system. Finally, a present-day unresolved question. The ethics of Aang's decision to destroy Sonam's staff.
What are the open ethical questions here? If a tool can restore a nearly erased culture, is destroying it always the right choice? Or does it depend on who decides and how consent is handled?
The film offers a clear answer for Aang. Power without balance corrupts, and restoration by imposition repeats the harms it seeks to heal. Yet several questions remain productively open. One concerns distributive justice. Could any framework exist in which artifact-enabled bending is consensual, limited, and non-hierarchical? Or is the metaphysical cost inherently too high? Another concerns memory versus power. Do cultures primarily persist through values, practices, and communities, as the film's ending suggests? Or can carefully bounded interventions redress historical erasures without reproducing domination? A third concerns precedent. By closing this pathway, the Avatar forecloses not just abuse, but any experiment in remedial empowerment. Is that caution or paternalism? The film wisely resolves the immediate crisis while leaving the philosophical geometry unsolved.
And what does the story say about cultural heritage and power dynamics today? To me, The Denied read like a study in grievance meeting a dangerous amplifier. Is the message that empowerment without values education is a recipe for collapse?
That is a fair synthesis. The denied, once granted airbending, become an argument for why capability absent stewardship invites catastrophe. Jia's leadership and Calic's participation illustrate how structural resentment can be co-opted by a charismatic but traumatized vision, here embodied by Taga. Aang's counterproposal is deliberately slow. Build a new air temple near Republic City, welcome acolytes, learn from surviving sky bison, and transmit values before power. For further research, we might model the social effect of artifact-driven empowerment, how it perturbs legitimacy and intergroup trust, and compare it to non-coercive cultural revival via institutions, pedagogy, and shared civic spaces such as Republic City. In conclusion, the film suggests that power can at best be a derivative of culture, never its foundation. To summarize, Avatar Aang, The Last Airbender, is the first feature from Avatar Studios, a continuation of the original series with hybrid 2D-3D animation, a culturally aligned voice ensemble, and a score by Jeremy Zuckerman scaled to full orchestra. We explored continuity and novelty under the co-creator's stewardship, a counterfactual distribution trajectory absent the 2026 leak, and unresolved ethics around destroying Sonam's staff. If this whets your appetite, the broader Avatar universe, The Legend of Korra, and prospective Avatar Studios projects offers a living laboratory for these questions.
So, I guess that kind of sums it up. Thank you for listening, and good luck with your studies this week.
This concludes our lecture for today. Be well and keep your cabbages close.